In the heart of Santa Barbara, California, behind the heavy iron gates of the Neverland Ranch, a secret was about to be born. It was a scorching afternoon in 1991. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and the sound of a distant carousel. Michael Jackson, the biggest star on the planet, stood at the edge of his property. He was watching a young boy standing by the perimeter fence. The boy looked exhausted. His clothes were dusty. His shoes were worn through. Security usually chased everyone away, but Michael signaled them to stop. He walked toward the gate with a curious look on his eyes. "Can you help me?" the boy whispered. His voice was barely audible over the wind. Michael didn't call the police. He didn't turn away. Instead, he did something that his management team had strictly forbidden. He opened the gate. "Come inside," Michael said. But as the boy stepped onto the private grass of the world's most famous playground, a black SUV was watching from the main road. Inside that car was a man who had been waiting for Michael to make one single mistake. What the boy was carrying in his small, tattered backpack wasn't clothes. It was a document. And that document had the power to end the King of Pop's career before the decade was over. But Michael didn't know that yet. He smiled and led the boy toward the main house. "What's your name?" Michael asked. The boy looked up, his eyes filled with a strange, cold intensity. "You already know me, Michael," the boy replied. The King of Pop stopped walking. The wind died down. Total silence, because Michael realized the boy's face looked exactly like his own. Before the surgeries, before the fame, before the world changed him. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was who was waiting for the boy to come back out. Inside the mansion at Neverland, the atmosphere shifted. The bright lights of the amusement park outside felt miles away. They were in the private library now, a room filled with leather-bound books and secrets. Michael sat the boy down. He ordered the staff to bring food, but the boy wouldn't eat. He just kept his hand gripped tightly on his backpack. "Who sent you?" Michael asked, his voice dropping to that famous breathy whisper. The boy didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out a Polaroid photograph. It was old, faded. It showed a young woman standing in front of a small apartment building in Gary, Indiana. Michael's hand began to shake. He recognized that building. He recognized that woman. It was a part of his life he thought he had paid to keep silent forever. "She told me if I ever got lost, to find the man in the castle," the boy said. Outside, Michael's head of security, Bill, was pacing. He knew something was wrong. He had seen the black SUV at the gate. He knew the tabloids were circling like vultures. "Michael, we have a meeting with Pepsi in an hour," Bill called through the door. "We need to move the kid out. Give us 5 minutes." Michael shouted back. It was the first time Bill had heard him sound truly terrified. The boy leaned in closer. "The man in the car told me to give you this," he whispered. He handed Michael a small cassette tape. No label, just a magnetic strip full of potential destruction. Michael looked at the tape. He knew that if he played it, his life would never be the same. What happened next changed everything. Michael walked over to a vintage tape player. He pressed play. The voice that came out of the speakers wasn't the boy's, it wasn't Michael's. It was a voice from the grave. The recording started with static. Then a woman's scream, followed by a deep, booming laugh that Michael would recognize anywhere. It was the voice of Joe Jackson. But he wasn't talking about music. He wasn't talking about rehearsals. "If the press finds out about the other one," the voice on the tape said, "the whole empire falls. We bury it. We bury it in Indiana and we never look back." Michael turned pale. He looked at the boy. The boy was staring at the floor. "Who is the other one?" Michael whispered to himself. Suddenly, the front door of the mansion burst open. It wasn't security. It wasn't the staff. It was a lawyer. A man known in Los Angeles as the Fixer. He looked at Michael, then at the boy, then at the tape player. "Michael, get away from him," the lawyer barked. "Now." "He's just a boy," Michael defended, stepping in front of the child. "He's not just a boy, Michael," the lawyer said, stepping into the light. "He's a lawsuit. And he's been wired since the moment he touched the gate." Michael looked down at the boy's chest. Under the dusty shirt, a small red light was blinking. The boy wasn't there for help. He was there for a recording, and that's when things got worse. The boy stood up. He wasn't crying anymore. He looked Michael dead in the eye and said the words that would haunt the singer for the rest of his life. "They have the body, Michael. They found the site in Gary." Michael felt his knees give out. The other one, the secret his father had kept. The reason he built Neverland, to hide from a reality he couldn't face. But the boy had one more revelation. "I'm not the only one they sent," the boy whispered. Outside, the sound of news helicopters began to thump in the distance. The black SUV was no longer alone. 5 more were coming up the driveway. The sky over Santa Barbara was turning a bruised purple as evening approached. But for Michael Jackson, the world was going pitch black. "Lock the gates." The lawyer screamed into his radio. "No one gets in. No one gets out." But it was too late. The helicopters were already overhead, their spotlights sweeping across the statues and the train tracks of Neverland. The media had been tipped off. Inside the library, Michael was panicking. He grabbed the boy by the shoulders. "Who told you to say those things? Who told you about Indiana?" The boy didn't flinch. "To the man who looks like you." Michael froze. A man who looks like him? He didn't have a twin, or did he? He remembered the rumors, the stories his mother used to whisper late at night. The lost brother, who had been sent away because he wasn't marketable. The lawyer grabbed Michael's arm. "We have to get you to the bunker. If the police show up with a warrant based on this kid's wire, we can't stop them." "I'm not leaving him," Michael cried. Suddenly, the power went out. The entire ranch plunged into darkness. The music from the carousel stopped mid-note. The only light came from the red blinking dot on the boy's chest. "Michael," a voice called out from the hallway. It wasn't the lawyer. It wasn't Bill. It was a voice that sounded exactly like Michael's, but deeper, more bitter. A figure stepped into the doorway. In the faint light of the helicopters above, Michael saw a man wearing a black fedora and a sequined glove. But his face was scarred. He looked like a nightmare version of the King of Pop. "Hello, brother," the man said. "I've come to take what's mine." The boy walked over to the scarred man and took his hand. "Did you get it?" the man asked the boy. The boy handed him the backpack. The man opened it and pulled out a small metallic box. Michael's eyes widened. "The crown jewels," he whispered. But it wasn't jewelry. It was the master recordings of the unreleased songs. Songs that were worth billions. "This is just the beginning, Michael," the man said. "Wait until the world sees the footage from 1978. And that's when Michael realized the boy wasn't the distraction. The boy was the key. The wire wasn't a bomb. It was a sensor. As soon as Michael's pulse hit a certain level, the suitcase clicked. A hidden compartment popped open. Inside wasn't another letter. It was a digital drive and a small glass vial filled with a clear blue liquid. "Michael, get inside," the lawyer screamed, trying to pull him back from the balcony. But Michael was staring at the vial. He knew what it was. He had seen it in the lab downstairs. It was the original, the DNA. The only thing that could prove he was who he said he was. "If they get this, they can make as many of me as they want," Michael whispered to himself. The sirens were getting closer. The flashing blue and red lights were reflecting off the gold-leafed statues in the garden. Suddenly, the boy appeared on the balcony next to him. He didn't look like a victim anymore. He looked like a soldier. "They're not here for the letters, Michael," the boy said. "They're here for the vial. If you drink it, you remember. If they take it, you forget." "Remember what?" Michael asked, his head spinning. "Remember what happened in Gary, Indiana in 1968, the boy said. "The night the first Michael died." Michael's world tilted. Memories he had buried for decades began to claw their way to the surface. A fire, a basement, a father's cold, calculated decision to protect the investment. "You're not his son," Michael realized, looking at the boy. "You're me," the boy didn't blink. "I'm the one who stayed in the basement. And now I'm coming out." Below, the security gates were smashed open. The police cars roared up the driveway, but they weren't stopping the black SUVs. They were escorting them. The fixer lawyer pulled a gun from his waistband. But he didn't point it at the police, he pointed it at Michael. "Give me the vial, Michael," the lawyer said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "The Sony contract requires the product to remain pure. We can't have the original DNA floating around." Michael backed away toward the edge of the balcony. "The world loves the King of Pop," the lawyer said, stepping closer. "But they don't need the man. They just need the image. And we have plenty of images ready to take your place." Michael looked at the boy. The boy nodded. Michael looked at the vial. He looked at the screaming fans at the gate. He looked at the cameras, and then he did the most controversial thing of his career. He threw the vial, but he didn't throw it to the lawyer. And he didn't throw it to the man in the SUV. He threw it directly into the crowd of fans. Chaos erupted. The vial shattered on the pavement, but the liquid didn't just sit there. It began to evaporate, turning into a thick blue mist that spread through the crowd like a virus. The fans began to scream. But it wasn't a scream of excitement. It was a scream of recognition. Suddenly, thousands of people in Los Olivos were seeing the same thing. A collective vision. The basement in Indiana. The lab under the ranch. The truth about the empire of pop. Shoot him! The man by the SUV roared. The lawyer pulled the trigger, but the bullet didn't hit Michael. The boy had jumped in front of him. The boy fell to the ground, but he didn't bleed red. He bled the same blue liquid that was in the vial. "Run, Michael," the boy whispered, his body starting to dissolve into the air. "Go to the Carrollwood house. The vault is already open." The police were swarming the balcony now. Michael turned and ran. Not to the stairs, but to the roof. He knew every inch of this house. He jumped onto the trellis and slid down to the back gardens. He ran through the darkness, past the sleeping giraffes and the silent Ferris wheel. He reached the perimeter fence. The black SUV was waiting, but the driver wasn't the man from before. The driver was the woman from the news. The mother. "Get in," she said. "We have to get to Los Angeles before the sun comes up." "Who are you really?" Michael asked, as the car sped away from the burning lights of Neverland. The woman looked at him through the rearview mirror. Her eyes were glowing with a faint blue light. "I'm the one who survived the first purge," she said. "And Michael." "Look at the passenger seat." Michael looked. On the seat was a mirror. He picked it up and looked at his reflection. But it wasn't his face, it was the face of the scarred man from the library. "The transition is starting," she said. Michael looked out the window as they hit the highway toward LA. Behind them, Neverland was being engulfed in a strange blue fire. But when he looked at his hand, he saw a date tattooed on his wrist that hadn't been there a minute ago. June 25th, 2009. And underneath it, a single word: replacement. But then his phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. It was a photo. A photo of Michael Jackson, perfectly healthy, standing in a small coffee shop in Dubai. The caption read, "They think they killed you tonight. Don't tell them they missed." Michael looked at the woman driving the car. She was smiling, but then he saw her hand on the steering wheel. She was wearing a silver glove and it was covered in blood. The man in the shadows didn't run. He didn't hide. He stood there watching Michael crumble. "You think you're the only one who suffered?" The man hissed. "You got the fame. I got the basement. You got the world. I got the silence." "I didn't know," Michael pleaded. "They told me you were gone." "They lied," the man replied. "Just like you lied to them." The lawyer tried to intervene, but the man pulled out a small remote. "One press of this button, and the live stream from this room goes to every major network in the country. The world will see the real Michael Jackson." Michael looked at the boy. The boy looked at the man. "Is this what you want?" Michael asked. "To destroy everything I've built for the children? For the music?" "I want the truth to breathe, Michael," the man said. He turned to leave, the boy following close behind. But as they reached the door, the man stopped. He looked back at Michael with a look of pure pity. "By the way," the man said, "the police aren't coming for me. They're coming for what's under the floorboards of the bedroom." Michael felt his heart stop. "There's nothing there. Are you sure?" The man smiled. "Check the third plank from the window. The one with the scratch." The man and the boy vanished into the dark hallway. Seconds later, the power roared back on. Michael ignored the lawyer. He ignored the sirens. He ran up the stairs to his private quarters. He threw himself onto the floor by the window. He found the third plank. He found the scratch. He pried the wood up with his bare hands, his fingernails bleeding. Underneath was a small, dusty suitcase. Michael opened it. Inside was a collection of letters. Letters written in his own handwriting. But he didn't remember writing them. He picked up the first one. It was addressed to the authorities. It was a confession. But as he read the first line, he realized the handwriting was a perfect match. But the dates were from the future. The first line read, "By the time you find this, it will be June 25th, 2009. Michael dropped the letter. His eyes drifted to the window. Down on the driveway, the boy was standing alone. He looked up at Michael's window and pointed a single finger. But when Michael looked closer, the boy wasn't pointing at him. He was pointing at the person standing directly behind Michael in the mirror. But when Michael turned around, the room was empty, except for the tape player, which had started spinning again on its own. And the voice that came out this time wasn't Joe Jackson's. It was Michael's own voice, screaming for help, but the screams were coming from inside the walls. Chapter 6. The Mirror's Shadow. The screams didn't stop. They echoed through the vents of the Neverland mansion in Los Olivos, California. Michael stood paralyzed in the center of his bedroom. The air felt ice cold. The lawyer was banging on the door, but Michael couldn't move. He was staring at the suitcase from the floorboards. The letters, the dates, 2009. It was impossible. Michael, open the door. Bill, the head of security, shouted from the hallway, but Michael wasn't looking at the door. He was looking at the suitcase again. Beneath the letters was a small silver key. It had a tag attached to it with a single address, 100 North Carrollwood Drive, Los Angeles. That was a house Michael didn't even own yet. A house he wouldn't step into for another decade. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was the sound of scratching coming from inside the massive walk-in closet. Michael walked toward it, his hand trembling. He pulled the handle. The closet was empty, or it seemed to be. But as the light from the hallway hit the back wall, Michael saw it. A hidden keypad behind a row of red military jackets. He didn't know the code. He had never seen this keypad in his own house. "Try the boy's birthday," a voice whispered. Michael spun around. There was no one there, but he remembered the boy's eyes. He remembered the date on the first letter. He punched in the numbers. 0829, his own birthday. The wall didn't just slide open. It hissed. Beyond the wall was a staircase leading deep into the California soil. And at the bottom of those stairs, a light was already on. Michael stepped into the dark, and that's when things got worse. Deep beneath the surface of Santa Barbara County, Michael found a room that shouldn't exist. It wasn't a wine cellar. It wasn't a panic room. It was a laboratory, clean, white, clinical. It looked like a wing of a high-tech hospital in Silicon Valley. On the monitors, live feeds were playing. But they weren't feeds of Neverland. They were feeds of a small nondescript house in Gary, Indiana. His childhood home. In the center of the room sat a single chair. And on that chair was a man. He was wearing a hospital gown. His head was wrapped in bandages. He turned slowly toward Michael. "You're late," the man said. The voice was a perfect replica of Michael's 1980s thriller-era tone. "Who are you?" Michael gasped, backing away into a table full of surgical instruments. "I am the version of you that didn't go to the Pepsi commercial," the man said. "I am the one they kept in the dark while you became a god." The man stood up. He was taller than Michael, stronger. "The boy you met at the gate, he's not a fan. He's the first successful bridge," the man explained, pointing to a glass tank in the corner. Inside the tank, a liquid moved rhythmically, and inside that liquid was a heart. It was beating. "They've been replacing you piece by piece, Michael. Every surgery, every accident, every time you went under anesthesia, they took a bit more of the original." Michael looked at his own hands. He felt a sudden sharp pain in his chest. "The suitcase you found? It's the roadmap of your demise," the man hissed. "They've already planned the end. And they've already picked the date." Suddenly an alarm began to blare. A red light flashed across the white walls. "Security override," a computer voice announced. "Purge sequence initiated in 60 seconds. The man in the gown grabbed Michael's arm. "You have to choose. Stay here and die with the truth, or go back up and live the lie until 2009. But as Michael turned to run for the stairs, he saw something on the computer screen that stopped his heart. It was a photo of the boy. But the caption didn't say subject, it said successor. Michael scrambled back up the hidden stairs just as the heavy steel door slammed shut behind him. He was back in his bedroom in Los Olivos. He was gasping for air. His heart was racing. Outside, the noise of the news helicopters was deafening. The spotlights were scanning the house like they were looking for a fugitive. Bill burst into the room. "Michael, we have to go. The sheriff's department is at the main gate with a warrant." "A warrant for what?" Michael screamed. They say they received an anonymous tip about a missing person, Bill said, his face pale. They think there's someone trapped on the property. Michael looked at the closet wall. It looked perfectly normal again. The laboratory, the man in the bandages, the beating heart. It felt like a fever dream. Where is the boy? Michael asked. He disappeared, Bill replied. 1 minute he was in the kitchen, the next, he was gone. But Michael, look at this. Bill handed Michael a tablet. It was a live stream from a local news station in Los Angeles. A woman was standing in front of a camera. She looked exactly like the woman in the Polaroid from the boy's backpack. My son went into that ranch to find his father, she was telling the reporters. And now Michael Jackson won't let him leave. The fixer lawyer pushed past Bill. It's a setup, Michael. A total frame job. But if they find that suitcase you're holding, we're done. Give it to me. Michael looked at the suitcase. He remembered the letter about June 2009. He remembered the other one. No, Michael said, his voice suddenly cold. I'm handling this myself. He pushed past the lawyer and walked out onto the balcony overlooking the driveway. The 5 black SUVs were still there, but the doors were open now, and standing in front of the lead vehicle was a man Michael recognized. A man who had been a friend for years. That man with more power than any record executive in New York City. The man looked up at Michael and smiled. He held up a cell phone. One call, Michael, the man yelled over the helicopters. One call and the woman on the news tells the truth, or one call and the accident happens tonight. Michael realized then that the boy, the lab and the letters were all part of a much larger game. A game played by people who owned the very air he breathed. What do you want? Michael shouted back. The man pointed to the suitcase in Michael's hand. I want the confession. The real one. But as Michael looked down at the suitcase, he noticed something he had missed before. There was a small wire leading from the handle directly into his own sleeve.